of the Bentleigh Pines School Board of Directors to order. My name is Carrie Douglas, Vice Chair. To my right is Superintendent Dr. Cook, Deputy Superintendent Dr. Burke, and Board Clerk Janet Bojanowski. And to my left are Director Tatum, Director Chadwick, Director Fisher, Director Olson, and Director Tomlin. Would you please stand, remove your hats, and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now move to Agenda Item 3, Review of the Agenda. Dr. Cook, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Fellow board members, are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing no requests for changes, we will proceed with the agenda as noticed. At this time, we will recess the regular meeting and call the budget hearing to order. This hearing is for the 2025-2026 budget as approved by the Budget Committee on May 13th, 2025. The purpose of this hearing is to receive citizen testimony on the approved budget prior to the adoption by the Board of Directors. At this time, we will now hear from those that have requested to provide public testimony on the 2025-2026 budget. And we have one person that has signed up, Jen Sawyer.
Is it green?
Now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Forgive me, I was unaware that this was a very specific meeting, but this kind of ties into the budget, I suppose. Good evening, my name is Jen Sawyer. I am a 2003 graduate of Bentleigh Pines School District. Also, I am currently employed by the Bentleigh Pines School District and serve as a campus monitor, AKA the Mistress of Detention, at Caldera High School. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge your service to this community as board members. As a board member myself, I understand the sacrifice you all make to serve the community in this capacity. Thank you for stepping up. I am here tonight to provide input for the public record. I am here on my own accord, and I speak for myself. In 2024, my annual salary was roughly $24,500 as a campus monitor. A week ago, I and many others attended the Excellence in Education Award. We received marble apples and recognition for the hard work and dedication we give the Bentleigh Pines School District. I wore a black shirt that read, "I don't get paid enough for this." It is this shirt, in fact. To bring attention to inadequate pay for support staff. In my opinion, support staff are the glue of every building in the district. I also believe deeply in the power of good trouble. On Thursday, the group photo that was taken at this event was published to district website and Facebook page with my shirt very poorly blacked out. This act reeks of censorship. It's giving very mid, as the youth say. I'm hoping that this moment starts a serious conversation about the massive inequity in pay for support staff. Good people are getting burnt out. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone that provided their testimony. At this time, we will close the budget hearing and reconvene the regular board meeting. Final board action on the 2025-2026 budget is scheduled to take place at the June 17th, 2025 regular board meeting. At this time, I will turn to Kenzie Martin, Executive Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Equity, to lead the work session.
One each. Just one.
Huh?
Just one.
I need a pen.
Oh, yep, I have pens. We're at a board meeting. Pull it together. Oh, right.
All right, thank you for having us. We're going to start with introductions, just so you know who our group is tonight, and then we'll zoom back out and set the context before we jump back to the work that these folks represent. So I'm Kinsey Martin. I use she, her pronouns. I do policy and advocacy work for our school district.
My name is Alexis Alaparia. I use she, her pronouns. I am a district sub and a parent of 3 high school age students. We've attended 5 of the 6 high schools in town by our graduation, and my kids identify as Black. We also have neurodiversity and mental health in our family.
I'm Katie Blodgett. I use she, they, and I am part of both the Equity Coalition and the Alliance meeting or group. I'm also a parent of an autistic child in the Ben Lapine school system.
My name is Lynn. I'm a Chinese teacher at the COCC. I'm also the Asian family liaison at the school district, and I'm also a parent of 2 kids here.
All right, so you'll get to hear from them quite a bit as we move through tonight. But first, I am, let's see. Oh, it's buzzing now. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm excited to get to connect with you all about the work of one of our strategic initiatives that is in support of your and our organizational goal 3, wellness, inclusion, and belonging. This strategic initiative is stakeholder engagement. So we're going to talk to you tonight about, hopefully you leave with a sense of current efforts and accomplishments and celebrations within this work, as well as some next steps and priorities. And that's where we'd love some input from you, more to come on the paper that's in front of you with that. And then also to hear specifically about a really central structure within our stakeholder engagement work, which is our Equity Coalition. So you'll hear more from 3 of our Equity Coalition representatives tonight. We're going to start first with just a quick connection activity. And this is the activity itself. I thought, well, we could just turn and talk with partners. I think there is a lot of power and value in establishing as a group some values, some shared experiences. So we are going to do it as a whole group, but we'll each need to kind of commit to being a little bit brief. So we can, if everybody takes 1 minute, that's a good 15 minutes of time. So the question for you is, or the prompt, describe a personal experience you recall of a family or community member engaging in your education in a meaningful way. And that's pretty broad. It can be something from your childhood, your adult education, you engaging in a child's education, any direction that you want to take that, but brief. So I will start because I've probably had the most time to think about this. My son is in middle school and math is not his favorite subject. He struggles a bit with math. And there is a volunteer in his classroom who is a retired doctor who just loves math, I guess, and volunteers and works with him one-on-one. Through chance, we found out it's a family friend of my parents. Bend is still a very small town in that way. And my son just loves working with this guy, and he has made math fun and personal for my son in a way that I certainly cannot. And a teacher of a class of 30, would struggle to do. And so just this community volunteer has made a difference for my kid. And we'll go this way, if you're okay with that.
I remember in elementary school, I went to Bear Creek Elementary, and my mom was actually the Bear Creek Bear. And none of my friends knew that. So it was really cool to know that that was my mom that was out there, and just knowing that she was there and part of the school and running the Bear Creek Marathon every year as the bear. So anyway, so that's something that still sticks with me from like 1st and 2nd grade. So.
I remember in high school, a friend of mine was in student body, I don't know, student body, some sort of elected person, student body VP or something for our grade level. And they had a class that was part of that. And she asked my mom to come in and do a presentation about, I don't know, a variety of different corporations and how they kind of message and vision some of their work. And I remember thinking like, really? My mom? Like, you're asking my mom to come and do that? And my mom was just always my mom for me, but for other people, she stood out in different ways. And I remember that was like kind of a first time that was sort of a striking, surprising thing for me.
Mine will go quick. The local fisheries and wildlife biologist in my community took a special liking to me when I was about 6. And there was fishing contests and things you did as a kid in our community growing up. And I got to go from being one of those kinds of kids who got to be the recipient of the activities to actually helping him. And he's one of the main reasons that I got so lit up and decided I wanted to go into science as an adult.
My mom volunteering in my class regularly, and just remembering that made me feel like she really cared about school and she knew my friends and I could talk to her about the class and we could talk about it together. And so now doing the same thing for my girls every week, no matter how busy I am, and is such an important way of connecting with them for all the same reasons.
Yeah, so I will say when I read this question, it felt like a burn to me because my family was not supportive and not some people that I felt like were helping my education. I felt like they hindered more. But I will talk about Mr. Hauser, Dean Hauser, my favorite teacher from high school. And you know, I think I loved him because he was always like, you are one of the best students I've ever had. Like, you have all the potential to make yourself great regardless of anything else going on. And he wrote in my senior yearbook, you know, I will never forget the sound of your shuffling feet coming down the hallway. And one day you are going to accomplish so much when you learn to pick your feet up when you walk.
So I was a pretty strong like C student, and I remember in 4th grade, we moved around a lot. In 4th grade, I was in Germany, and we had an extra. Well, my bedroom was going to be the like guest room when people from the States would visit us. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that meant I couldn't decorate it. And I had a teacher, Mrs. Joy. So I also was in the hallways because I had to read out loud to myself. But Mrs. Joy, who I think was probably one of the very few teachers of color there, I think she was Hawaiian, but she gave me like this roll of paper, you know, they used to put on bulletin boards and stuff like that. So she let me choose my favorite color, and then I could decorate that and put it over all these fancy paintings and stuff in my bedroom so that it would be my place. And I just remember she was like the kindest, most thoughtful person ever. So yeah, that was Mrs. Joy in 4th grade.
Okay, well, I couldn't take the time to think that far back from my own educational experience, so I'm going to go on my children. And my neighbors, Jim and Sally, here in Bend, they were neighbors of 17 years, same house next door, but they had lived there for over 60 years in that little house. And they raised 4 children, and all 4 kids went to Bear Creek Elementary. And both my kids went to Bear Creek Elementary, and I remember when my first was suiting up for kindergarten, and Jim and Sally would encourage her, and then my second on how much they loved Bear Creek Elementary for their 4 kids, and they were kind of grandparents, surrogate grandparents. And so I think that really sparked this connection that their grown kids went there, and my kids were going to go there, and they talked about it every day, and they could talk about the bear and talk about the marathon, and I think that just was a really powerful connection for my kids to be engaged in that school because their surrogate grandparents' kids went there.
Well, I don't remember that far back very well either, but when I was in elementary school in Portland, we had a female lady principal. And I didn't know women could be principals at that time. Now remember, I'm old, so it was a long time ago. But here's the fun part. My mother was very involved with PTA. So she and my principal and my mother kind of got to be friends, which I thought was really cool for a while. Until my mother got the phone call. Do you know who Shirley's going to lunch with? I think you better pull her in a little bit. So then I wasn't so excited about having my mother involved in school.
Well, our son struggled a lot in high school. He barely made it through. He sort of wandered around trying to figure out what he wanted to do after high school. And I was teaching at a college up in upstate New York, and finally convinced him to take a few classes at the college. He got to where he got excited about learning. He sailed through and he graduated at the community college. And I taught at that college, but that year he graduated, I happened to be standing in for the department chair. So I got to be up on the stage, and I just did the forestry students that graduated. He wasn't in forestry, but when he came to walk across the stage, the president brought me up to hand him his diploma. So that was a really special time for us, and he's excelled since then. He's now a surgical tech and doing really well. So he finally got the message.
I have been debate. I should share my own experience or talking about my kids. So I'm going to follow to talk about my kids' experience. So when my family moved to Bend, my daughter was 10 years old, and she was she attended fourth grade at High Lakes Elementary School. Before that, she had very limited English education. So when we moved here, she barely speak English, so she often brought Chinese book to her school to read. And one day her teacher told her, Shelley, you are very special because you can read Chinese books. So I think that's huge encouragement for her to continue to maintain her cultural heritage and also maintain her Chinese proficiency. So I really think that experience really shaped who she is nowadays. So I really appreciate the education here.
I had the delight of going to high school at the rival school district in Sisters. But I had a really great set of teachers. I was the weirdo kid that didn't really have a whole lot of friends, but made friends with all the teachers. So Carol Dixon and John Renner and everybody. So I had a really good set of teachers that had my back and, you know, pushed me to go out there and explore more. And I am very happy that my own child is experiencing that, where maybe they don't have a lot of social friends, but they are finding their friends and teachers and administrative staff that get them through. So I'm very appreciative of that.
When I was in elementary school, my mom was hired as the lunch noon duty aide. So she had a badge and a whistle, and it felt pretty special. It was a big lift for her to take time out of her day, her work life to do that, and it felt really affirming, and that education was valuable, and that she was going to find a way to engage in the adventure I was on, regardless of if it was inconvenient or uncomfortable, and started a pattern of showing up in the way that she could.
All right, thank you, everyone. Just if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to think of one word that sort of captures the theme that you heard and just jot it somewhere on your paper, in a corner maybe. Pick like one word or a phrase, it's fine. And the reason that we did this activity in part is because we're asking teachers to do these activities with students as far as, social emotional learning. Our Wayfinder activities are asking kids to engage in this way, and it can feel really vulnerable. And you might look around and go, gosh, other people had privileges and experiences that I didn't have, and that makes me maybe feel particularly vulnerable. But it also develops a shared foundation for the learning that we're about to engage in together. So, so that was the purpose of that activity. Hopefully, you have a sense, like I do right now, just a reminder that stakeholder engagement isn't something we do for stakeholder engagement's sake. It is something for, we do this so that our students feel seen, connected, heard, valued. And so this conversation, like I said, you're going to hear some things that we're proud of, some successes and celebrations, but also some priorities that we feel like are pretty urgent and connect directly to academic success and passion, purpose, and plan. So the next step that you're going to do, we're going to get into partners in a minute. I think there's kind of some natural groupings here. And you are going to do a brainstorm. Partner A is the person closer to the window in the partnership. Partner A is going to brainstorm who are our stakeholders from the lens of roles or relationships. So we heard things just now like teacher, parent, community volunteer, just, you might think through media or, all of the people out there or the roles out there that make up our stakeholders. So partner A is going to brainstorm those. Partner B is going to brainstorm more from the identities or experiences. So, it might be people of color, it might be our linguistically diverse community, it might be those experiencing houselessness. So different identities or experiences that might be another way to group our stakeholders. So let's just do 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay. So decide who's A and B, and then we'll just take, 90 seconds to brainstorm your list, and then we'll pause and go from there. Sorry, jot your list on your paper, and your partner will jot their list on their paper, and then we'll talk in a minute. Let's do like 30 more seconds. Okay, so as you wrap that up, what you and your partner are going to do is just share your lists with one another. And then, I was partner A, so I will share the roles or sort of relationships, or titles is the wrong word, but just kind of those roles in the community that I have on my list. And then my partner will share identities and experiences from her list, and then we'll compare, and she might have some suggestions for mine. We'll just kind of notice what we see about our lists. So go ahead and share with your partner. here. I feel like there's a little bit of a lull, so I'm gonna take it and jump in. That might not have been, well, it probably was not enough time to get every idea on your paper. You can keep going throughout the night. I do want to just mention, we're gonna do a couple more things on your notes sheet, and then I'm hoping to get these from you at the end of the night. So they can't be less legible than mine, so that's good. But just as you go, feel free to keep adding as we talk through the evening. Anybody want to just share ahas or interesting conversation or things you hadn't thought about that came up as you went through either set of those lists?
When my partner was sharing, I was partner A, she was partner B, I immediately started thinking about all of the identities and experiences that each of my group in my list of roles and relationships, and all of a sudden got very overwhelmed with how many different variations we could have when it comes to what's the message and how does it land and all the groups that are impacted.
This will expose how much I don't like math, but remember that, I can't even remember what it's called, where there's like this, and then off of it, you can make all these permutations or whatever they're called. So like just within parents, then you have parents experiencing houselessness, parents experiencing immigration. Yeah, those kind of iterations. Yeah, anybody else?
What was the question again, please?
Just any thoughts, anything interesting that came up in your conversation as you compared lists?
I'll just say I had the identities and experiences, and I was really conscious to name both identities and experiences that are often called out as needing special attention and those that aren't. Like I had tag students, struggling students, and then average students who like often get left out of the conversation, and kind of tried to do that with all the categories.
Thank you. Okay. So hopefully that gave you a sense, like Dr. Cook mentioned, of when we say stakeholders, I think hopefully first on the list somewhere was students and probably families or parents and extended family, staff, and then from there you can go into, the community members who have no connection except that they pay taxes, or higher education and all of those in between. But that exercise in part is because we are trying to get better at identifying and mapping out who's out there and who are we well connected with and who are we not. That's part of why I want your lists so that we can check ourselves and get some feedback from you around, are we getting better at identifying all of the people out there and then all the permutations and different folks that we need to connect with. I do want to just point out, this slide is maybe a little overwhelming, but that we really have a pretty well codified commitment to stakeholder engagement. It shows up in everything from an executive limitation around our stakeholders all the way to the use of our facilities, takes into account our community engagement. And this is not comprehensive. This was just a super quick, like top 10, I think, that popped up. So our equity stance explicitly articulates a commitment to our stakeholders. So I appreciate that our leadership, beginning with the board, has made that an important commitment, and that we've codified that in policy and important guidance documents. With that, I think we've been able to have several successes and accomplishments. So some of those: resource allocation. We have space in our budget to engage with our community in different ways, whether that's, dinner and childcare when we're asking families to come engage with us, or, tabling events when Parks and Rec says, hey, we have this event going on, we'd like the school district to be represented. We make sure that we compensate folks and have the space to do that. And staffing, we have liaisons, family liaisons, culturally specific liaisons. We've got someone out in South County doing really explicit family engagement work. And it is definitely something our principals think about all the time as well. Entry points, we are growing in our opportunities for people to be involved. So, you can volunteer, like many of you said your parents volunteered in your class. Many people don't have the luxury of being able to volunteer in their kids' classrooms. So there's other ways to get involved. You can be part of events. You can help with fundraising type activities. You can read the communications that are really amazing quality that come out as far as interactive newsletters, and lots of other ways that we, district staff meetings are something new this year to engage our staff as an important stakeholder group. So we're growing. The entry points piece, none of these are to say like we've arrived with any of these, but we definitely feel like there's more and more entry points for however someone wants to engage with our system. We're getting better at finding a way for them to do that. Feedback and input opportunities. We definitely have plenty of opportunities to give input. Youth Truth and school site councils, levy surveys, public comment are just a few of the ways that our community can let us know what they think. Many of these will come back up later as areas for improvement as well. So just know that those are coming back. And then we do have, and I think this is an area where I think we feel really proud, in particular of stakeholder engagement, where it says strong and adaptive structures and partnerships. We have a variety of partnerships from formal to informal, Bend Parks and Rec or Deschutes County Public Health. We have very strong formal, agreements in writing and ongoing partnership with them, all the way to sort of ad hoc as things come up with different community groups that we are responsive to needs. And then sometimes where it's not necessarily a formal like MOU type agreement, but we, for example, with Latino Community Association, are constantly working with them on supports for families that we both serve and share, and how do we get better at making sure that no families are dropping through the cracks. So we have a variety of different structures and partnerships. We have, in particular, some advisories that are becoming a really more and more critical part of our system. So we have our Equity Coalition, which you're going to hear about in just a minute, our Latino Family Advisory, which has been in existence and partnering with us as family leaders for about almost 10 years now, I think. Many of the members have been on it since the very beginning. We have our Student Voice Council that you all helped launch, our LGBTQ Alliance, our Black Family Student Union. We have staff advisory groups new this year. We have cultural nights. So a variety of different ways that we are engaging more regularly, not these one-time, hey, we want to come ask you something, okay, great, we're done with you, but really ongoing relationship building through those advisories. And I want to spend some time digging into one in particular that's pretty central to our structure of advisories. Our Equity Coalition is, I'm going to go back for a second. So I think we've shared with you previously the image where we have our Equity Coalition, who sits kind of at the hub of a wheel of different advisories with Latino Family Advisory and our Black Family Student Union and several of those that I just mentioned, community partnerships and Student Voice Council, all sort of are like spokes out from that hub. With sort of back and forth communication going between those groups. The Equity Coalition sits at the middle of that, in part because it is one of our really mixed representative groups. So all those other ones are, to some degree, none of them are strictly affinity spaces, but they're homogenous in terms of role or identity or function. And so our Equity Coalition is really representative of each of those efforts. It's also the only one that is legislatively required. So in 2021, I think, the state passed Senate Bill 732, requiring that every school district have an Equity Coalition. And we had actually already had one, which you're going to hear a little bit about the history in just a minute. But we were a little ahead of the game, which was nice to have our feet under us when this new legislation came out. The state has pretty specific requirements for what the Equity Coalition must do in their function as a district leadership advisory committee, and you're going to hear more about that from our representatives tonight. But we chose this group because the state, in their language, has identified this structure as a powerful mechanism to engage community voice. This really sits at the center of our stakeholder engagement work. So we wanted to make sure that you hear about the work going on. It overlaps really nicely with some of the policy work that I know you all engage in regularly, and just have some time to talk with a few of our representatives. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lynn to talk to you about the history and kind of current structure.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the history and the work of our district's Equity Coalition. Tonight, I'm excited to take you through our journey over the past 5 years and highlight the impact we have made along the way. Let's start with a brief look at the history of the Equity Coalition. Our coalition was founded 5 years ago with a simple but powerful mission: to promote equity across our district. From the very beginning, our focus have been on one single goal: ensuring that every student, no matter their background, has the support and the resources they need to succeed. Next, I want to introduce you to our current membership. Over the years, the coalition has evolved as new members have joined, bringing fresh ideas, much like a new energy breathing life into a community. Today, our membership is a reflection of the diversity that defined our community. We have 4 students, 2 community members, 5 parents, and 4 staff members. Our members represent a broad range of backgrounds, including Black, White, Chinese, Latino, and the Jewish communities. Additionally, we have students from the IB program and the parents of students with disabilities. This diversity is virtual because it ensures that we approach equity issues from multiple perspectives, all working together to address the challenges within our district. Now, I would like to highlight some of the meaningful work we have accomplished. We have grown and evolved over the years. Our core purpose have remained constant: to be a voice for those who are often underrepresented in school decision-making. Here are a couple examples of the strides we have made. Number 1, Parents' Rights Workshops. One of our key initiatives have been supporting family engagement through our Parents' Rights Workshops during parent-teacher conferences. These workshops were designed to educate parents about their rights within the educational system and provide them with strategies to advocate for their children. We also offer suggested questions that parents could use to guide the conversation with teachers, helping them to take an active role in their children's education and ensure effective communication. To break down language barriers, we suggest schools provide language translation services, making sure the non-English speaking families could fully participate. Additionally, we developed and implemented a family engaged policy to strengthen the relationship between families and the district, ensuring that all parents feel informed, supported, and connected to their children's learning experience. Number 2, curriculum adoption and review. The Equity Coalition have been deeply involved in district's curriculum adoption and review process. In 2023, District Curriculum Director Julie Walkers and Dean Richards joined our meeting to present on the status of the curriculum review, stakeholder engagement, and adoptions for secondary language arts. The coalition reviewed handouts on the core value, goals, and outcomes specific to reading and writing. Our members offered valuable feedback on the language arts curriculum, highlighting what they agreed with, point out assumptions that they believe were being made, sharing their aha moments, and pose important questions for the authors. Okay, now I'm going to pass on to my folks.
Okay, so one of the responsibilities is engaging and monitoring culture and climate within the community, sort of to help give a troubleshooting guide for council members and the district as a whole. We kind of lead by example. We like to see firsthand how things are being implemented. I know more recently, we had a couple lunchroom trips where we got to observe students in the lunchroom setting and how culturally or how well they split off or how well they group together, and kind of get the dynamics of that within the climate, our culture in the district. Another one was to review how AI is used in the classrooms. So there were a couple different classroom visits. The one I remember the most was kind of important to me because I had to do with special education and observing how they're using AI for certain students with disabilities that maybe can't do certain things, and how this is helping them continue with the classroom as if they were, had the same abilities. So that was very helpful to see that in action. Another one was grading. We were able to talk with the folks putting together the new grading system. So instead of just reading about it, we were able to see it in real time and see how that's going to affect the classroom and how teachers are going to be able to use that, and the feedback from teachers as well as students. And then there's a couple times where we'll partner with other parts of the groups like the Student Voice Council and come together and have group sessions to hear from the students as well as teachers. So it's important to be not just on paper, but out and about and seeing everything with our own eyes and hearing from everybody firsthand.
Thanks, Katie. If our first pillar of the Equity Coalition is to have a thumb on culture and climate that exists in the district, our second pillar is to center and honor student voice. So practically, we have four high school students representing 2 of the high schools that sit in our monthly committee meetings, and they bring just an invaluable boots on the ground, what does this really look like, experience to the topic at hand. I believe they're centered as like equal participants, if not the experts in the room. We listen well to what they're having to say, and they direct the conversation as much as the rest of us do. This year, they've had valuable input regarding this standard-based grading shift, being able to talk about how that's rolled out across different class subjects and things they'd like to see happen. Also, they've given input on the grading and credit policy. We spent quite a bit of time hearing their voice in the lag from assignment to grade or from grading to posting, and how that would impact their classroom experience. They also were very engaged in the conversations around district fundraising listening sessions. The Student Voice Council joined us on that. And then informally, functionally, our Equity Coalition and the Student Voice Council have dinner together before we split off into our separate meetings. And so we also get some opportunity to engage with students who do not sit in the Equity Coalition meeting on topics of student life and engagement. And we've been so thankful for our students' engagement, and look forward to replacing some graduating ones and growing new recruitment of students in the coming year. And then the third pillar of the Equity Coalition is to bring an equity lens to policy decision-making. In this last academic year, we have looked at informing a policy around the use of artificial intelligence in classroom. As mentioned, the Student Voice Council, the grading and credit policy was something we've looked at. In addition, the advertising policy was something we have input on. The fundraising and attendance policies that are still in process have come to us in different iterations to be able to provide our centered feedback on. And then early in the year, we continued the conversation on the religion policy to look at protected days that when we built the school calendar to be considered how to approach being considerate around days that would be important in various communities. And so those 3 prongs, looking at climate and culture that exists in the school and how we want to shape that, looking at student voice, and then functionally advising through our multifaceted equity lens on the policies that are either coming up or down, or however they end up engaging in those conversations, are the 3 main ways the Equity Coalition shows up.
All right, and just as a reminder, those 3 prongs are required by state legislation to be the charge of the Equity Coalition. And so I think they fit really nicely, but they're not something that we just decided to pick. They're something the state has said this group must advise on, those 3 sort of prongs. So that's where those came from. We're gonna do just one last piece, and then I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and digging back through all of this. So I mentioned just zooming back out specifically from the Equity Coalition. They are our central group, but knowing that just looking at the lists we started with, our stakeholders are a very, very diverse and broad group of people. And so we recognize that while we feel good about a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past several years, we have still a very long way to go, in particular with some groups more than others. So one of the next things that we're working on, and again, this is where your list comes in, is continuing to identify gaps and barriers. So who's not at the table, or who are we not going out to engage with? We don't want to set up a system where they need to come to us all the time. So in what ways are we missing groups of people? Where are those gaps? What are the barriers? And then with that, the entry points, how do we continue to offer more entry points, or points where we are going out and entering the community in that way? For example, home visits, really wanting to dig into what does it look like to be neighbors and partners with our families in a different way than always asking families to come to us. So that's something that we'll be digging into as we sort of already are in that stage, but we'll continue that work. And then as we continue some of the groups that we have, the advisory groups that I've mentioned, how do we get better at intersectional collaboration across those groups? We've done a little of that this year. We had a state level leader come work with members of our advisory groups on some advocacy work. But how do we get better at connecting and networking so that we aren't the ones always holding and facilitating that space, but that we are, you've heard a little of it in the Equity Coalition and Student Voice Council have dinner together so that they can connect on their, as they see fit in an informal structure. So that's another goal, is how do we expand and offer more of those points? One example of that is our expanded wellness committee. We're excited to be taking our current wellness committee, which is doing really amazing work, primarily around child nutrition, and expand it to connect with other aspects of our wellness work that includes staff members, mental health, physical health, environmental health, and all the other components of wellness that there's some really great stuff happening. And so trying to build connections between those efforts for, people keep laughing at this word, but I kind of like it, for some synergy across efforts. And then another area that it will be a continued priority, community learning and shared investment. So making sure that we feel confident that all of our stakeholder groups are clear on our district values, they know where we want to be headed, they know how they can, what those entry points are for themselves. Our communications team is really leading a lot of great work in that area. And so thinking about how do we go reach folks that we don't traditionally have at the table, or even maybe think about. Again, that's where your lists and ideas come in. And so that people feel part of the district work and not just, I'm being asked to pay taxes for what again? So that's a continued piece of our stakeholder engagement work. And then last and maybe most important, I mentioned earlier, we feel confident we have a lot of feedback opportunities through surveys and public comment and these different ways for people to engage. We really want to make sure that we are honoring people's feedback when they give it, and that we are turning that into action, and that it is showing up in school design plans, in strategic initiatives, in organizational goals, in all levels of our commitments, that we aren't just hearing people, but we're saying we hear you, here's what we're going to do about it, and here's where we're centering that feedback in our plans for the next however many years. And then some accountability with that. So if a school says, we've heard our stakeholders, that relate to this school saying X and Y and Z, we want to be able to point to their school design plan and see where is that feedback feeding into your design plan and what's, coming out of it, so we get some cycles and feedback loops going. So those are just a few of our next steps and priorities. And this is where we would love your input again. So going back to your notes and returning to your partner, thinking about the anecdotes that just this small group of, I would say, probably pretty privileged folks have shared in this space tonight, and that sense of stakeholder engagement as a way that our students are seen and valued and connected. Look back through your lists of stakeholders, maybe even pick where are you in those lists of stakeholders. Maybe you're a staff member and a parent, maybe you're a grandparent and a person of color, or just kind of where you identify yourself. And then brainstorm. There's a couple of asks of you somewhere on your sheet. If you would write down as key elected officials and community leaders, it's important that you all and we all as district leaders are celebrating the strengths in our system. And so if there's something that you heard tonight that feels like, oh, I didn't know we're doing that, or, oh, that's right, I knew that, but that's something that probably our community needs to hear a little more of, just jot down a note about what's something you want to celebrate or share with your constituents in some way, or remind constituents that something is available to them. And then identifying an opportunity within either the next steps that we talked about, the priorities, or something else that you'd like us to focus on. Share a suggestion with us for stakeholder engagement, a next step we might think about, something you didn't hear tonight, or a tip if there's something that you can connect us to help us get better in this work. So a celebration and a suggestion somewhere on your sheet. And there can be a lot of them if you want. I am hoping to collect these from you because we genuinely are hoping that our board's feedback on this is obviously really critical in our next steps. So just a couple of minutes to turn and talk with a partner about any of that, and then jot down some notes, and then we'll go to Q&A with our Equity Coalition members. All right, I'm gonna bring us back. Hate interrupting good conversation. Does anybody, like we did after the last partner brainstorm, if anyone wants to share just a key point from your conversation, an aha, a great idea, something that came up?
Something Carrie and I were just talking about is schools don't seem to vocally ask for volunteers to bring parents and community members into our schools. And, you know, we were saying that like you sometimes as a parent have to be proactive about reaching out to get involved, but it seems like that should be the other way around if we want to make our schools welcoming to families.
Yeah, better advertising, invitations, and maybe some onboarding too for volunteers. Yeah, yeah. Did you write that? Perfect. Other thoughts?
I'd piggyback on that for just a minute. I don't know that I think individual schools do some things for their volunteers, but we don't really know about it. So it'd be great if those kind of events get advertised and shared. So that if a school, for example, we've got several new principals, you know, and you can only accomplish 5 things in 1 year, right? But that kind of encouragement, I think, would be really helpful. And it might end up with more volunteers. And there are people who would volunteer in a lot of different ways as you talk about entry points. You know, I may not want to go into a classroom or into my kid's classroom, but I might want to do something else.
Yeah. Or so your first part was referring to like celebrations, thank you, appreciation of volunteers. Maybe if we build that, we can build the loop a little better.
Yeah.
Both of those ends of the, yeah. Thank you.
I'm sort of perpetually interested in how we make our schools very attractive to those who are not connected to schools or don't have kids in our schools, because our community members are what allow us to do a lot of the things that we choose to do with taxpayer funds. So making our schools be overtly positive for everybody who's not connected is important. But I have yet to land on how to do that well.
Well, and to build off that, I regularly have like patients of mine who are like, I'm retired and I'm an expert in this field and I would love to go into the schools, but I have no idea how to do that and if that's even something that's open to me as an opportunity. And it's like we do have, you know, a wealth of people in the community with experience and knowledge who are willing to come into our schools, but they don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me think of, I mentioned the retired doctor who's volunteering in a math class, and I don't know how he found that. I think he might know that math teacher, but if you don't have that connection, maybe we need a brochure or something that says, invites people in.
Do we have anything on the website that's like a volunteer portal?
Yeah, we have it, but we could probably look at it with a more of a stakeholder engagement lens than I think right now. It's a little more on the transaction side of background check, sort of procedural to become a volunteer. So yeah.
Well, I think one of the things, like you're saying, like a lot of folks, they may be older folks who have the time to volunteer, right? Or who are retired, and like how are we reaching out to those folks, right? And so it kind of reminds me of like I would love to have like the Black Student Union to like be invited to Alliance meetings. I would like Alliance members to be invited to, I mean, vice versa, same thing, right? Like, so I feel like because there is so much intersectionality, that we also need to think about like, what are other places that people could potentially hear about these things, right? Even with smart readers, you know, with the summer coming, like I've heard from volunteers that, you know, they're like, what are the students gonna do? But really it's like, what am I gonna do? I'm not gonna have someone to read to anymore. And yeah, so like, what are those opportunities or those other places that we might not necessarily think about, that we need to start thinking about?
We were also saying we hear a lot of misconceptions in the community, and how could parents or community members get their questions asked in a way that doesn't feel as high stakes maybe as a board meeting? So like coffee with a principal or dinner. I don't know if schools have experimented with that, but ways for parents and community members to ask questions in a way that feels more welcoming and less high stakes.
A little more intimate with the, yeah, and we have some schools doing, I think, versions of, coffee with the principal, that kind of thing. But, again, I think there's how do we promote it so everybody knows about it too? That's a piece.
I've seen at a lot of schools, they have non-traditional career days where they bring in businesses to come in and talk about how women can get involved in traditionally men careers, and vice versa. Men could get involved more in healthcare type careers. So those tend to be things that, focus on equity as well as bring businesses in, so.
I think a model in community partnerships that was really successful that I'd like to see expanded. My oldest participated in the Health Pathways Exploration with St. Charles, in which a group of handful of kids shadowed each week for 8 weeks different hospital-based jobs. And I thought it was a great model of them being available, our kids learning some real world stuff about potential careers. And I wonder if that can be extended into other fields and business partnerships that we have in town.
Definitely, and I know we have some really cool partnerships within CTE and some other related fields like that, but having a list of, do we all know about those? How do we, if we're talking to someone, how do we point them to something if we don't know where it is? And then how do we expand them to be more accessible?
One thing I heard also was just related to the parent rights or, advocacy pieces, which I had known but had forgotten. So it was nice to hear that again and have a reminder of something that I think is really meaningful in terms of advocacy and celebration and support for folks in our community.
I've said this before, but I'm just going to say it one more time because I feel so passionate about it. It can be, sometimes you have to really push to get to volunteer in your kid's classroom rather than being really invited. And then I feel like volunteers are really under maximized a lot of the time. I'm a former teacher, so I can go in and pull reading groups and pull math groups and really help the teachers that are short-staffed and trying to meet so many needs. And if we provided some training for volunteers, either at the district level so that individual schools didn't have to do that, or providing a toolkit to schools to easily train volunteers, imagine if we had parents who were actually trained and welcomed and maximized and could extend the reach of teachers. That could be really powerful, and we feel really far away from that.
Yeah, I think as a former elementary teacher, I remember the time it took to prepare to have volunteers in my class. It was like a significant amount of work, knowing that they're going to save me a lot of work, but just the prep to do that. And so the more we can onboard and prepare parents to, or whoever wants to come in and volunteer, to kind of jump in or give teachers tools so that it's quicker for them would be helpful. So yeah, that's a great suggestion.
On the flip side, also volunteers, et cetera, but focusing also on teachers to be aware of the value of investing in your volunteers. And ultimately, it helps them in the long run for more family engagement for their student success, right? And I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh, it's going to take so much work to incorporate our volunteers that teachers forget the long-term benefits. And so how can we get teachers on board? And that's probably building level, but also district level of the value of volunteers. Post-pandemic, I think it has really been a significant comeback process to make volunteers feel really welcome because it was so stringent. And I think that slowly coming back, but I've heard the same concerns from parents and community members.
Yeah, more of a campaign maybe that we could revitalize. Awesome. I'm going to move us on. Please make sure anything that you said got jotted down somehow so we can remember and work through some of those pieces. I want to just give time to revisit in particular, again, the Equity Coalition being a statutorily required structure in every school district, and we are really proud of the one that we have, that we've built over the last 5 years, and the members that make up that team. And so while you have a few of them here, you heard everything from the policy support, a lot of recommendations and hashing, and students being like, oh, you think that's what happens? Here's how that policy really works in practice in classrooms. And going out and being in cafeterias, watching the, who stays on campus, who leaves, who sits with whom, as Katie was mentioning, that culture and climate, and then, all of the work that this group has put into helping us know where to direct our priorities. I think that we've been really fortunate to have a group that I think we have several members who have been with us since the beginning, the past 5 years. And then some newer, we have terms and a little bit of shifting, but while they're here, I'd love to give you a chance to ask them any questions. And I'll go back to the slide that had the 3 prongs, just if that's helpful, if you have any questions for the team.
I'm curious to hear more about, Katie, you mentioned the AI and in the classroom. Can you talk a little more about that?
It depends on the grade level and the teacher, because it's kind of up to the teacher whether or not they want to incorporate that. I know for high school level, it's more so you can use this writing prompt to get yourself started if you're having trouble sentence starting. And it's sort of teacher discretion to say, I'm going to allow you to use this program for this, but then your final has to be solely written by you, kind of thing. It's using English as an example, any language arts class, generally speaking. Another one that unfortunately I wasn't able to go to, but I know Kenzie mentioned that she went to at the middle or elementary? Was it the Oregon Trail? And it was, students could ask the AI program what it was like along the trail. So they would ask random questions, and then the computer would come up with the answer in association with the subject that they were learning. Alexis was more in on that one.
Sure. I was at the elementary school engagement. It was a 4th grade tag classroom, and the teacher had prompted the activity by talking about identifying 5 or 6 different personas. Are you an unmarried man traveling out? Do you want to chat with the president? Do you want to chat with a mom of 3? And then they engaged in what felt like a texting conversation with a bot identifying one of those personalities, and were able to ask really pertinent questions like, what did you pack in your wagon? And then if they asked something that was a little more off topic or potentially spicy in its response, the AI bot would redirect and bring them back into trying to have a focused conversation. This class and the district, they've purchased an AI portal, perhaps Magic School, is that correct? And so there is greater opportunity for the teacher to both set up activities and track classes. They're not just out like in the wide internet world. And so this was one of those activities that the teacher had put some physical parameters on and then trained the students on the expectations of the activity before they did some independent exploration, with the intent of that interaction helping the students then generate their own packing list for their own Oregon Trail experience, which was coming up in the curriculum.
A couple things around equity, that one of the roles that the teacher had identified they could chat with was a Native American. So there's just so many opportunities to unpack issues of power and, really important history in there. So there was a nice sort of equity lens and opportunity for critical thinking built into that activity. We also were in that same school, I think it was a 3rd grade tag classroom, where they were using the same AI tool the teacher had put in on the back end, do a review of area and perimeter, something like that. And so it spit out the same prompt to every single kid, and the kid would answer it, it would say, do you want to start with this? Would you like to do a diagram? Would you like to do a word problem? Something like that. And they would all start, and it would start adapting to them. And by the time we were sitting there watching, there was one kid who was needing a number line with frogs jumping on it to do some more basic counting skills. And there was another kid that I couldn't even understand what math they were doing. And so the kids didn't know who was doing what. They were all doing this AI review, but it differentiated some review math practice for them in a way that would have taken that teacher hours and hours to design. So pretty neat. And one of the kids in the Oregon Trail class asked, how many graves have you seen along the way? And I was like, oh boy, where's this gonna go? And AI came back with a really gentle and caring and educational response that talked about, the different ways that people lost their lives on the Oregon Trail, and how when they would pass along a grave, how people generally would add a rock or otherwise sort of honor the grave, and then had some statistics about health and the Oregon Trail built in. So even though the kid didn't really ask that question, they still got a really educational response. So it was interesting to see those. Yeah.
The part that I got to see was how our special education teachers were using AI tools. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ones. Like I mentioned with language arts, the sentence starters was a really good one for them to use with students that had trouble focusing on the subject matter. Like maybe they really didn't know how to get started on talking about the history of the Civil War. So it was a really hard topic for them. So it would kind of start them with, hey, you could start with these couple different things and go from there. So it gave them ideas to run with. Another one was it would give them, it was like a recipe thing, I remember, or at least that's what I had asked. It was write a cookie recipe. And so it would give the basics of this is what you would want to put into your essay, is make sure you cover these things. And so it was geared more towards the way they were using it for students that maybe they didn't need to do this huge elaborate essay, but they needed to understand what, the basic topic was. Another one was the speech to text was mentioned a couple times that they use. I know it doesn't seem like it's an AI tool, but it actually is, especially for students that have trouble writing or have language barriers. The speech to text can help with that. There was a couple other ones. I know they didn't go over all of them, but they pointed them all out to us. It was basically like a one page. They go to that one page and then they choose which one that they need for that specific student. I know like with students that are maybe not verbal, they can type that in and have that speak for them, kind of thing. So it's I don't want to say it's basic in what it is. It's certainly not really along the lines of ChatGPT. I know that that's more of a high school, like a higher education kind of thing. And I know a lot of teachers don't necessarily use that wholeheartedly in their classrooms. They could say things like, you can use this to do your rough outline. You can use this to start, but your final needs to be written by you. And that's kind of what they were going over.
I think one of the most exciting parts of AI in a special education setting or a special education student in a typical classroom setting is how quickly teachers can differentiate. For example, reading levels. They can load in the article and then ask for this article to be processed for a 5th grade reading level and a 9th grade reading level and a college reading level. And then the whole classroom, regardless of their reading level, can be engaging around the same topics. And to just have AI turn that out super quickly seems like a really wonderful way to keep every student engaged at a level they can access, but on the same content.
Do you all have you mentioned Equity Lens. Do you have Equity Lens, like a list of questions that you use to analyze policies or processes or whatever?
I mean, it's more sort of background and experience because we have different people from different groups. We have parents mixed in with educators and then parents of students with disabilities, parents of students within like the Latino communities and the Asian American communities, to have that be like, that works for you, but I'm going to propose something different. And, you know, from my experience, this is what we deal with, kind of thing. So it helped, especially with the religion policy, identifying which holidays maybe get overlooked. And some of our community members really would appreciate if we weren't scheduling sporting events at the same time we're trying to observe this particular holiday. So it was helpful for that. So we try to have a broad spectrum of community members, and we encourage fellow community members to join us.
And we do have as a district an equity lens that's a set of questions that, you know, ideally you filter a decision through, and it should help you.
Right.
But, you know, kind of like with AI, if you're, the first question is, who is this, you know, who's impacted by this decision? And you can be like, nobody, this is great. We're all gonna love it. You know, depending on who's using the tool, who's answering that question. So, you know, we try to continue training our staff around the use of the equity lens, but then our equity coalition, as Katie was describing, they really are the ones who like, well, I'd like to propose from a different perspective that maybe this isn't meeting everybody's needs. So they, in a sense, our equity coalition is our equity lens on a lot of our decisions.
I have a question about, well, student input, but also family input with regard to the standards-based grading. Do you have just like just a little snapshot on kind of the consensus of what you've heard from members of the Equity Coalition?
I know the students had a lot to say about it. There was a lot of back and forth about, well, this teacher uses this and this teacher uses that. And I think if we're gonna do this, we need to make it across the board, you know, everyone has to use this particular grading. So a lot of the input came from student voice on that. A couple parents chimed in, myself included, but more so I'm just basically confused about the grading system in general. Kenzie, it was really great, could bring in somebody that was doing that grading and give us examples of how this is supposed to work, what this is going to look like for the students, for the parents, for the teachers. So it was really helpful to have somebody come in and show that example to everybody, including the students.
But you definitely have heard an anxiety of how slow the rollout is because people are doing different things and it's a long wait till the finish line.
Yes, that did come up.
I think when we first were talking about the new grading shift, our Equity Coalition was like, I mean, there were comments, one member had big concerns about, wait, are we grading on a curve? Is that what this is? We're now grading on a curve? There was just and I was doing my best to try to support, and so we brought in Stephen Duvall. And after that, the group was sort of like, oh, okay, we get it, we support that. Then the issue became the students going, but you know that's not happening, right? Like that's the rollout.
Your
and
checks
the
and
shift.
balances.
Yes, totally. So their biggest thing was, I have one teacher that I think is doing what you're describing, but I have another teacher who's not. And that's the hardest thing for the students, was the differences right now.
Right here, right now, yeah.
And I
Okay,
would add some
thank you.
anxiety on what is our district doing compared to other districts. So when I go to compete for college admission, will I be impacted in a certain way compared to other school districts?
Interesting. Okay. One other question on that. I'm curious if you mentioned lots of other different, issues to process with the group, but with the coalition. Did anything about the cell phone policy come up in any of your conversations, or was that kind of hands off?
Not currently. I mean, it is something we could take a look at, certainly. I think a lot of students, though, were pretty just, we're used to putting it away or seeing other students not follow those rules. Again, it was like some teachers say yay and some teachers say no, and some teachers don't care and some teachers do. So it really was per classroom, but it didn't really come up because I feel like they already know what the outcome is.
Yeah. Okay. I think our Student Voice Council had more conversation around that than our Equity Coalition did.
So one of the themes is inconsistencies in how things are done across the district. And that's definitely an area I feel like that we all need to be working on. And I'm just going to drop that comment right there.
Yes.
I have a question I don't know quite how to ask. There is so much that you talk about, that you experience, that you're doing. Do you feel like you have many ways to get that out to us, to schools, to parents, to in general? I mean, Kinsey does a good job of an excellent job of keeping us informed and what's going on. But how do you feel about, the things that come up that you think are important? And how do you be assured that somebody else is listening?
I think we do receive feedback and comments from the board and the community because every time after the discussion, we draw the kind of suggestions, and Kinsey will help us to bring to the board and share with the community on the district website. And I believe we do hear the feedback, and we did make some positive change. I hope it's all positive. Yeah, I do feel that way. But in the future, I would like to hear that communication more direct and more frequent, and it's just so we can exchange the information and make things happen more efficiently.
I think I feel very well supported in Kinsey representing what we do up the food chain to administration, to you. I think Kinsey takes our conversation and shares out. The piece I'd like to see develop in the future is us also being seen as a place community members, school members could come and share something with me. My lens on the Equity Coalition is because of my personal family's identity, but I also have friends who fall into some of these other categories who, if we could show up in spaces for them to say, hey, I have this place where I can share my voice. Can you share with me so I can represent there? Would be a really nice thing to do.
And that was an opportunity when Stephen Duvall came and gave sort of, here's what we mean when we talk about the standards-based grading work, and they had that presentation and the group sort of went, that was great, like now I get it. Then the ask for them was, if you have a space where we can do that, and I talked with Stephen before I committed this, let us know and we will come, like one of our parents has a group, maybe through her, anyways, a social network of hers that's interested in getting that presentation. And so she didn't feel comfortable doing it herself, but is interested in either inviting Stephen or having a pre-recorded version of that presentation that she can take and give in her social network as, here is something I know that I want you all to know. So that key communicator model is something that we're trying to build into, as Alexis was mentioning.
Thanks. I'm glad that you feel pretty confident in that. There's always more opportunities for communication back and forth. You can't ever get to the point where, oh yeah, we got it. But please know that what you're doing and what you're learning and what you're talking about is really extremely important to us.
One of the things that we consider as we have built this over time, and how the Equity Coalition sits as the center of the hub and one of many groups, right? Like that's just an important factor of this, is how we have almost 400 policies. And I think so far this year, we've put our hands on 50 or 60 of those 400. And which ones go in front of the Equity Coalition, which ones desire or need that level of attention. And one thing about this work, if you're making sustainable change, it is a slog. it takes time, it takes lots of input, and it can be daunting at how long it takes to get something accomplished. And so when we talk about things like fundraising or AI or different ways in which equity is manifesting either poorly or not up to standards in the district, and we need some support and help, or where that language lands in a policy, that's one of the reasons I think the state went this direction with the legal language that we want. And then our job, wherever we are in the food chain of the whole situation, is to try to make sure that it's meaningful and impactful work, that we are engaging stakeholders, our equity coalition, our students, our staff, so that when we say this is what we believe to be true about the direction we need to go forward, whether it's fundraising, for example, there's a reason that they're not seeing every one of those. We can bring policies that we'll have nobody left on the equity coalition because they'll be like, what are we doing? So that is an ongoing balance of competing needs.
I would echo that. This is a group of volunteers. They show up every month and then they do in-between work talking about our policies, which I think is very exciting, but I'm always surprised when they come back and engage. And so they're really digging into the actual work of the district with us.
I want to echo Shirley's comments about how because I think for the entire board, how we are so invested in what you're doing, and this is so aligned, not just because it's required, but because of with Kinsey's guidance and the investment of the members of the Equity Coalition really focusing in on things that are so valuable. One thing that I would put in my suggestions is to increase awareness, because I know so many families who would be so thrilled to learn. And maybe it's been in things, and you get so many, emails and announcements, you miss this stuff, but so many families who would be delighted to know that this work is happening. And next step for families who might want to get involved, are you currently recruiting and how are you doing that? And if not, then we can stop there. But if you are, let's get the word out.
Yes, we are currently recruiting both students, parents, community members at all levels. And it has, at this point, just been inviting through our personal networks. If we know someone through our spaces that we think would make a good fit for the Equity Coalition, to raise up their name to Kinsey and begin the vetting process there.
And I would say that for me and my sort of, I don't know, the dominant culture lens that I am maybe most comfortable with, that makes, it doesn't feel like a system. It doesn't feel like, we need an application process and all these pieces that we are working towards to some degree, but we had a consultant who helped us in those early years of developing our Equity Coalition who really recommended if we want people at the table who aren't already at all of our tables, we've got to do this a little differently. And so we've really tried to go slow and do a relationship-based approach. And so I think we're sort of finding a sweet spot with regard to continuing that relationship approach to recruiting and also making sure that there's increased awareness. We've definitely found we're sort of hitting a point where that needs to get a little heavier, just the publicity, promotion, and in a way that keeps our members feeling respected and protected, and because they're a thing or two about that, being in a volunteer leadership role. So
I don't want to call it a hurdle, but with the Equity Coalition versus the Alliance Board, like I'm also on the Alliance Board, and it's a little more lax. Whereas you don't have to be there at every meeting. It's more of a, can you volunteer for this, that, and the other thing? Whereas the Equity Coalition, you have to have a sort of commitment. I do believe it's 2 years. 2-year kind of commitment. And try not to miss more than 2 meetings. So I know sometimes that can be daunting for more of a parent volunteer when they've got so much else going on. Whereas they can maybe sit in on an Alliance meeting or 2 and still be helpful. But with the equity, they have to be more, it's a little more in depth. So that's something to consider.
yeah, there's several members who sit on a couple committees, so that's at least 2 meetings a month that they, again, a thing or two about that. But we really appreciate and try to honor that commitment.
And that, I think, that's very appreciated, and I appreciate the word of mouth piece, but also, like you mentioned, you could be missing some folks who aren't connected to your constellations. That could be really valuable. And the same thing with students. If only 2 high schools are being represented, how do you, and the same thing with, Alliance and Student Voice, how do you increase that? And it sounds like this is the time to move beyond that. So whatever we can do, I mean, I'll speak for myself, whatever I can do to help promote that, I would be happy to support.
I think that goes back to, hopefully you wrote down a strength that you want to celebrate or promote out in the community as a key stakeholder of our system. And so that might be one, just, hey, did you know? Hey, are you interested in? Would be a huge help to us for the Equity Coalition or any of the spokes that of other groups or structures that someone might want to be a part of. And those are all great suggestions too, so be sure to jot them down. And then Amy, I was thinking about Director Tatum, I was thinking about your comment around inconsistency, and definitely I think that's something that our district in a lot of different ways struggles with and is growing through. And I also think there's somewhere in that balancing too, there's space for innovation in that. And, it's kind of the way our country is set up, where different states are allowed to do things a little differently. And a state might start something that ooh, that's really cool, and grows to be a part of our broader community and society. And so I think that balance of how do we be consistent across schools and allow for innovation that really supports some of our equity work, that's I'm sure we're never quite balanced on one side or the other, but I do think that's a piece too of us going out and visiting schools, is seeing what are cool bright spots that are happening in that science classroom or with that AI tool that right now are optional for people because we're all learning, but that we can start to grow and make consistent as we see that innovation. And I think that's another role of stakeholders. They get to see lenses into our system that those of us who have heads down in it all the time don't necessarily see in the same way. So yeah, thank you for the conversation, and please, we really mean it. If you would put any other notes, thoughts, stakeholder groups, entry points, things you'd like to see, and then send those this direction, that would be wonderful. And please come visit our Equity Coalition. We'd be happy to have you at a meeting or chat further. So, okay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and everything you shared with us tonight. At this time, we will open the floor for board comment, and I'll start with Director Tomlin.
No, I just want to thank you very much for sharing all this information. It's such important work, so I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you.
While we're talking about AI, had the privilege of attending one of Kinsey's sessions along with the instructional IT people, staff, it geared to the administrators. And Tina was in the morning session and I was in the afternoon session, but it was really eye-opening. And thank you for spending some time thinking about that and sharing what you've seen in classrooms. I haven't seen that yet. And so I'm anxious for next year to get into more classrooms where it is being used. Very nice presentation, Kinsey, from those folks.
And I would like to add, I'm from a very not AI kind of person background, and for me to see how it's being used in the classroom was really helpful, that it wasn't just, oh, we're just telling a robot what to do kind of thing, because I come from the no anti-AI kind of background, so it was good to see that in a classroom setting.
I just want to appreciate your being at that training, and also nobody needs me around instructional technology topics. I had very little to do with that. Dr. Rush and Scott McDonald and Tracy Hauk and Robbie Faith put that together, so.
Thank you very much for all of you giving your time to be here. Also, I want to just appreciate the district for getting on the AI very quickly. I think a lot of districts are holding back for a bit, and I think the sooner the better, and I think that's so important that we're jumping on it now. So appreciate that.
Yeah, echoing what y'all said. And also wanted to send a shout out to teachers and staff who also helped us win the election. So I'm happy to be here for another 4 years. I'm happy Ross is and Shirley is, and where's Marcus isn't here. But
He'll be here though.
he will be here. Yeah, and I'm just having a like fuzzy, warm feeling right now that like this board has a lot going on, and we couldn't do it without leadership and cabinet. So happy to be here, and not just saying that. I really am happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you again. And I also wanted to just say thank you to my colleagues for running again. Elections are a lot of work, and governing is a lot more work. And the fact that you are all willing to sign up for another 4 years, hundreds of hours of dedication to this service and community every year for no pay and very little recognition. I really appreciate you. It made a bittersweet decision not to run again a lot easier, knowing that you were all around for another 4 years. So thank you. Our next regular school board business meeting is scheduled for June 17th. And with that said, this meeting is adjourned.